A little bit about Sarah. She has an extensive educational and professional background in tourism management with a Master's of Science degree in Recreation Management and Tourism from Arizona State University. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in journalism with a special emphasis in public relations. And she has been involved in promoting Alaska's wildlife, cultural, and natural resources for over 20 years. She lives here in Anchorage with her husband, Chris, and 16-year-old son, Jacob, and dog, Kumu. With that, welcome, Sarah, and thank you for coming back to speak with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have the conversation. These are fun conversations to have with other women leaders and also men leaders. But I love the topic, and I'm glad to be here. Do you want me to go ahead and get started with? I have just a short slide deck you're helping me with, or?
That sounds good. Just let me know when you want me to switch slides.
You can click on to the next slide because the first one was just thanking you all for having me as part of this presentation or this conversation. Really, it seems we have a small, but we can have a more one-on-one conversation maybe when I get through these slides really quickly. And really, I only have about 4 or 5 slides. So thanks for supporting me and clicking through them. But in talking with you all, you had asked just a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on the Alaska tourism industry, and then I'll talk more about my career path. As Mary Louise mentioned, I'm the CEO of the Alaska Travel Industry Association, and we are the leading statewide membership association for travel and tourism businesses and community partners in Alaska. Our mission is to promote Alaska as a premier visitor destination and as one of the state's economic contributors. And as well as being a voice, we're an advocacy group for travel and tourism. We are also the state of Alaska's manager of the destination marketing program. So we promote Alaska to visitors from around the world. Currently, we have a little over 600 tourism business members and partners. So we are a membership organization, and they represent small and large businesses from across the state, in every region of the state, and diverse sectors of the industry. So from mom and pop organizations, bed and breakfast owners, wilderness lodges, tour guides, and large ship cruise executives. We are honored to have Alaska's Lieutenant Governor as a ex officio member of our board of directors, and our board is member elected. There's 24 board members that are member elected each year that also represent the regions of the state. So next slide. I think I just have one slide that talks about pre and post and what our industry has and continues to go through, which is a unprecedented crisis for many Alaska tourism businesses. And this is sort of the downer, I guess, part of the conversation. So pre-pandemic, Alaska sees almost 60% of our visitors arrive by cruise in a normal year, and about a third by air, and then the rest by the Alaska-Canadian Highway and the Alaska Marine Highway. These more than 2.5 million visitors that we've welcomed in 2019 generated $4.5 billion in overall economic activity that supports 52,000 direct jobs and indirect jobs that we attribute back to a healthy tourism industry. We like to say that's 1 in 10 Alaska jobs. And obviously you all know, you all live in Alaska. Last year was really a drastically different story. Since about March of last year, every entry point into Alaska for visitors and for travel was impacted. 99% of large ship cruise sailings were canceled in Alaska. Air travel was significantly impacted, although we did see air travelers as the state started to implement the testing processes at the airports. And then recently, the Canadian government has extended their ban on large ship cruise travel, as well as added restrictions to land crossing through their border, which continues to impact then the cruise ship, the potential for cruise ship travelers, and also non-essential travel across the land border. So those numbers really then translate into pretty devastating employment losses across the board for Alaska and related to the leisure and hospitality industry. In particular, we're seeing some drastic numbers to the tune of 85% unemployment in Southeast communities, but we're really impacted across the state because we are a long haul destination for travelers, for out-of-state travelers. And as I mentioned, every pathway to Alaska has been impacted. We won't see the volume of cruise ship passengers this year, even if there is some solution worked out with the Canadian government and at the federal level. But we are at ATIA shifting gears to market to the independent and air traveler this summer to bring as many travelers as we can to Alaska this now summer and fall and winter. We are a year-round destination for many visitors. And then we're also renewing an in-state travel campaign that we launched last summer called Show Up for Alaska, which maybe some of you saw, in asking Alaskans and Alaska residents to get out again and explore someplace maybe you haven't been to in Alaska and support local tourism businesses. And I think I think I have a little bit of that on the next slide. A little bit of the logo. Oh no, I'm ahead of myself. That's okay. So some of the things that we're doing, I just mentioned to address what has been happening to our industry. And I'll go over this really brief, is that ATIA made a commitment early on that the health and safety of our teams and Alaskans and our visitors was a top priority. So in April last year, the ATI board approved high-level safety protocols for the tourism industry that businesses can look to now to adapt to as they look to open or reopen and welcome visitors in a safe way. We also continue to advocate for tourism businesses and partners through additional federal stimulus funds. We're in constant conversations with our congressional delegation about the complicated issue related to large cruise ship travel. And then at the state level, we advocate, and I've testified on behalf of small businesses to continue to provide support for the many businesses that are still trying to get through now another tough summer, even as some places in the lower 48 are opening up more and more. Our tourism industry could still see a challenging gap in 2021. And then I mentioned we're investing in marketing to the independent and air travel to market Alaska as a destination. So next slide. This is what I was mentioning, our Show Up for Alaska campaign, which we are going to renew, and you will be able to find soon specials and information at our travelalaska.com, our main consumer traveler website. So excited about that. So then the next slide, and I think this is my final slide. In the different presentations I've given, I talk about how travel and tourism shouldn't be a political issue. We all experience travel, and I think many of us love to travel. It connects us globally and locally, much like a technology company like Alaska Communications. It's a way of connecting all of us. And then through travel and tourism, I think it really supports our quality of life and brings both economic and social returns. And Alaska definitely has the wide open spaces and resilient businesses to provide safe travel experiences for residents and for visitors. And so that I was telling my son, he saw this picture when I was putting together the presentation, that I started a while ago to put pictures, end with pictures of my family in PowerPoint presentations, partly because I have this weird sense of humor. I like to embarrass them. But also with this one, my family loves to travel. In Alaska, we traveled throughout this last summer and winter to places we haven't been before, and we did it in a safe way. This was my 16-year-old son. This is my 16-year-old son, Jacob. He's in Southwest Alaska. His dad's not in the picture, but they went on a fly fishing trip to West Alaska and return safely and remain healthy. And we, like I said, love to travel and experience places in Alaska and around the world. And I just, this is sort of a transition into what I've learned as a leader at ATIA is that, we are part of this travel community and this broader community in Alaska that we will recover. I try to remain positive and not to be Pollyannic, but to focus on the positive steps forward so that not only can the Alaska travel community come out of this, but then we all will come out of this pandemic and be hopefully stronger together. So that's a little bit about ATIA and the tourism industry. And that's the rest of the slides. And so I can transition into just talking a little bit about my career path. If that.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Yeah, sharing your career journey, how you got to where you are. You've been in the industry a long time, why you chose it, what you love about it. Love to hear that.
Yeah, and I've had kind of a weird career path where there wasn't a linear pathway, or I like your word, journey towards being in this position now. I certainly enjoyed outdoor activities and traveling around my home state of Wisconsin, but I think it was really in Arizona where, in working for Arizona State Parks, I felt that connection to not only traveling to places throughout that state, but also experiencing the outdoors. And so much of that has overlap with the tourism industry in some ways, and definitely in Alaska's tourism industry. And so I did pursue a master's degree in what used to be called leisure studies, but I think that they wanted to become more formal. And so I graduated with a master's in recreation management and tourism, and really learned about the connections between public land and resources and industry. And that's what I brought with me to Alaska. And then in Alaska, I actually worked, my first position was in economic development, but I brought some of that tourism, I guess, educational background and grew a lot working for the Southwest Alaska Municipal Conference, which is an economic development organization in Alaska. And one of the first places I got to travel with that job, I was young back then, was to King Salmon, and just had an amazing experience interacting with people in King Salmon and talking about economic development, but with a tourism lens. And it just fueled the enthusiasm I had for travel and tourism and for our outdoor resources that Alaska has in spades. I also then had again, this is where it wasn't linear. I've worked for Fish and Game, so I sort of got to see the government side of things and promote wildlife viewing. I also took kind of I guess you could say, a break from travel and tourism, where I worked on fundraising for what used to be called Child Care Connection here in Anchorage and Alaska, and it's called THREAD. But even those fundraising skills helped broaden my overall knowledge of managing an organization. And then about 8 years ago, accepted the position as CEO with the Alaska Travel Industry Association. Along the way in different organizations, I think what I took from my career path is that there were certain skill sets I really grew that maybe weren't directly, this is recreation and tourism management. And, maybe it's bad of me to say I didn't really have my sights set on being a nonprofit CEO, but really taking from what I could from these various positions and in enhancing a certain skill. So whether it was fundraising at THREAD, or I also was a fundraiser at the Nature Conservancy in Alaska, or learning about the intersection between public lands and wildlife resources at Fish and Game with the travel industry. These were all things that helped me grow as a way, and I think added to the steps towards me being able to take this position as CEO at ATIA. So that's the weird career path. That's my word. I think it's kind of weird. And how I got here. I'm really proud of the work I and my team have done at ATIA. And to one of your questions, and then I'll stop talking because I do want it to be a conversation. I want to learn from you all too. That I think I've learned in this position and that I'm always trying to improve on is to be a really good listener for my team. And I think that's one of the things any leader, whether you're a man or a woman, helps lend towards your leadership. And I've often seen leaders that I admire. I don't see them talk a lot. I see them really listening and then adding thoughtful comments to a conversation or a dialogue. And that's what I really continue to strive to do.
Mm-hmm. I like that approach. Did you seek out your current position, or did somebody approach you about it, or how did that come to be?
I saw it advertised, actually. I knew a lot of people at ATIA from my previous positions. So I invited people that I knew on the ATIA board. These were tourism business owners and friends and colleagues. And I invited them out for coffee and asked them about the position and told them I was interested in applying. And at the same time, there were a couple board members that were asking me to apply. But then I submitted my information, I guess, on my own.
Got it. Wonderful. I will open it up if anybody wants to unmute their mic and ask a question, or you're welcome to put it in the chat. And otherwise, I will go ahead and ask some of our other questions. So I'll just pause for a moment. All right, I'm going to kick us off then. So, first question, we saw the recent article in ADN kind of calling on Alaskans to participate in tourism type, or, your Alaska campaign. And we know that each and every one of us plays a big role in the tourism and travel industry. Can you give us some other specific examples of how we can work together and support and promote our tourism businesses this upcoming year, in addition to just getting out and playing through those promotions as well?
Yeah, and I can't emphasize though enough, like even if you drive to, so I'll just share what we did this summer and winter. We drove to Lake Louise. We stayed in a lodge. We, stopped along the way and had to get gas. And we stayed in an RV campground in Valdez, and ate outside. This was summer with Valdez restaurants. And then this winter, we drove up to Fairbanks and went on a outside aurora viewing tour and a dog sled tour, and visited Chena Hot Springs. So, it's cool in that asking folks to get out and play also really benefits so many tourism businesses. And there is a trickle down effect from the actual tourism business, like let's say the accommodation, to the gas station, to maybe picking up a couple groceries, to the restaurants, whatever it is, and doing it safely, of course. But I think that tourism is one of those industries that has so many small businesses and is direct and indirect, that you're not just playing, which we hope you have a safe and wonderful experience, but you're really providing some revenue to businesses that it's much needed this year. And the other things that you can do is post your pictures and use social media as folks that work at Alaska Communications. Share with ATIA, with us, your feedback, but also post on your social media pictures and fun places that you've been. And that's like a real grassroots way of sharing the message about how great Alaska experiences are.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about the literal indirect of like the gas stations along the roadway. Nice. So I'll let Allison read. We got some questions coming in on the chat.
I was just going to say we have some questions on the chat. So Sarah, what is your favorite tourist activity to do in Alaska?
Well, that's not a fair question. I'm not allowed to say. But several that I like to do. I mean, I love visiting places in Alaska. That's one of the benefits of my job, and hopefully I'll get back to that, to be able to travel more and visit communities more in person. But I like being outdoors and hiking and experiencing all the great outdoor activities that Alaska has to offer. But I also like, sometimes staying in hotels and ordering room service. So for my birthday, I'm going to ALSK and I'm going to visit the spa. So I like the whole spectrum of travel and travel and tourism, from outdoor to indoor experiences.
All right, another one from Heather wrote, how have you seen the tourism business shift over the past year in how they operate and be successful? And what long-term changes do you think we might see in this industry in a post-pandemic world?
Yeah, I think one of the big changes I've seen many businesses shift to is having a more direct conversation with their customers. And that can be over the phone or online, but there's so much information now that travelers need to know, and the right information on how to travel safely, that it has made businesses that want to open and are able to open have that conversation, that even deeper conversation with their customer. And I think that has sort of shifted the tone. It's not so much about, paying for your reservation and going on your tour anymore. It's really about having that mutual relationship with your tour operator or your vendor. And then the other thing that I think we've seen in many, many businesses are incorporating these health and safety protocols, from whether it's more online information or access, as I mentioned, to cleaning protocols, for example. And I think that'll be a long-term impact and maybe improvement that we see even past the pandemic, that it's really heightened, I think, folks' awareness of how to maintain and be more resilient, to be able to have that healthy and safe experience.
How competitive do you think Alaska is versus other tourist destinations, I don't know, in the world or the nation, in regards to, I mean, we do have a lot of open space here, and you can come here and do things without being in a big city full of people.
So even before the pandemic, we were competing. I think Alaska competes globally. I think we can compete like at a country level. We are sometimes considered that exotic destination. And, I hope there's not too many people that still don't know Alaska as a state, but, we are big enough and have that scale and those landscapes and that rich history to be able to compete at a country level. And then also we compete with other destinations putting marketing dollars in the marketplace. And because we are a long haul destination, we do have to invest our marketing dollars a little differently, because it is an adventure. It's a journey in itself to get to Alaska, although you can travel to Alaska safely by air right now. And other folks, other destinations, especially in the lower 48, sometimes just have to have marketing strategies to attract people across a state line. And in the Pacific Northwest and Western states, they also have open spaces and national parks, nothing like we see in Alaska. But those are some of our competitors, including our partners in Canada. And I say friendly competitors too, because we do often collaborate on what strategies are working, especially during now. We've seen great support from particularly other Western state tourism directors. But I hope Alaska can remain competitive at that high level, because we have such the wide open spaces and we are able to host people safely.
Do you have any thoughts or, I guess, opinions on, I know they recently opened up that you no longer require a positive or a negative COVID test at the airports for air travel. Does that help things kind of in your opinion? Does it help us kind of move forward tourism this summer?
So ATIA has a commitment to the health and safety of our visitors and our teams, and we are encouraging our tourism businesses and visitors to continue with the processes that were in place before the health advisories. We know that they're not required anymore, but we strongly recommend that because we want to keep our community safe, but also we are hearing in general from travelers that those safety protocols are important to them when they're trip planning. So in order to keep our businesses open and to generate that activity, we see that having those protocols in place or offered to travelers helps hopefully will help generate more travelers coming to Alaska.
That's good feedback. All right, we got a couple additional questions in the chat. First, do you have some more information into how the cruise industry will recover? And then another question, separate, but do you think the ferry service could be used to get motorhomes to Alaska from Washington and bypass Canada?
Well, on the second one, I do think the Alaska Marine Highway, the ferry service, is allowed to operate certain itineraries that does kind of bypass the Canadian border. And I don't know how cost effective it is, though, for individual businesses to put motorhomes on the ferry. But as an individual, I believe that you can do that now. Again, there could be financial considerations on the ferry, but they are able to operate the Alaska Marine Highway from I think it's from Bellingham, Washington to communities in Alaska. So on that question, there's limited, but there is a pathway there for that. And then on the first question, that's the sort of the question of the day. I think that it's a complicated and challenging situation when you have federal legislation and also working with another government. But if conversations continue with the CDC and with the Canadian government in a timely way, there may be an opportunity for cruise ships to operate this summer. But I think that we're also really hopeful for 2022. And I'm certain that the cruise ships will recover. I think that all of us are absorbing that it might just take a couple more years than we'd hope. But they are committed to the Alaska product. Our cruise ship partners have been nothing but supportive. I think they are dealing with complicated conversations, but we're hopeful for this year in a limited way, and then also even more positive for 2022.
Are any of the major lines, are they all going to still be around in 2022, or do you think some of them will go out of business, or they're all pretty big right now?
I haven't heard that they would go out of business, but I'm not as in the know as some of my board directors, those are international companies. But all that I've heard is that they are committed to working with Alaska tourism businesses and doing what they can this summer. And then also, I think that they're hearing good news from their customers again for 2022. People want to still cruise to Alaska. And it's just getting through I think the CDC conversations and and again, it's just a complicated issue when you're dealing with federal legislation that was enacted in 1886 and you're dealing with another government.
Wow. Allison, I'll let you field the next question.
Let's see. So Marie, I'm going to kind of piggyback off one that you had mentioned when we were discussing around travel. There's a lot of travel up here that's geared towards cruise ships, and that's, kind of obviously a big source of our travel. There's also the kind of extreme adventure travel that you see promoted, come, Denali and climb glaciers and do all that kind of stuff. How do you guys address the kind of the do-it-yourself traveler, the couple who wants to come up and stay in Airbnbs and go on some great, you know, tours and do things like that? What's kind of the strategy to reach more folks that are, you know, maybe not the generation looking to cruise in, or the extreme parts of Alaska?
Yeah, so we are actually shifting our marketing resources now to target exactly those independent and air travelers, because that is the way you can access and get to Alaska. And we do things overall. ATI's role has been to market Alaska overall as a destination, and then we complement our partner efforts like at Visit Anchorage or Explore Fairbanks, and work with them as they are trying to attract visitors to their local communities or regions. But some of our marketing strategies that we use are targeted ads and messaging towards that type of independent traveler. So whether it's through imagery or the message, and then also the outlets that we'd use. So we do work with advertising and public relations agencies on who our media lists are. So whether it's, you know, targeted publications, online publications, or media that write for certain travel trade publications, that's a way too that we can target certain audiences related to those outdoor or maybe more independent type travelers.
I have, like, I guess a personal to me question. So we run an Airbnb, or we have an Airbnb property, and encouraging that this year we're almost booked solid. So people are definitely coming back. But I get questions constantly of what should I do while I'm there? And is there
what should you do about what? I'm sorry,
what should I do while I'm in Alaska?
Oh,
and I'm like, well, there's hundreds of things, and I can always refer them to like my favorite places or like the things I've experienced with. Is there a website or a resource I should direct them to that may have more information than I can provide?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I get that question too from family members and long lost friends when they come up, and I you know, I'm not a travel agent, but let me provide some suggestions to you. But, you know, one good resource that I have to promote is our main consumer website, which lists all those experiences and many businesses. It's travelalaska.com. It's our main consumer website that we promote to all potential travelers coming to Alaska. And then the other one I would mention, which is a little more focused, and I'll just put a plug in on sustainable or eco travel, is called adventuregreenalaska.org. And that is a program ATIA took under its umbrella that promotes sustainable tourism businesses, and it's a certification program. Those that achieve the Adventure Green Alaska certification get a little AGA logo, and then that website is really the main marketing tool and resource for those businesses.
Very cool.
Yeah, interesting. I've never heard of them, so now I know.
We need to do a better job promoting that program. That's what I heard you say.
Does anyone else in the participants have a question they'd like to ask verbally? Yeah, just put it in the chat if you do. I'll go ahead and move along. This is a little bit of a pivot of a question, but we were wondering if you could comment on how you've seen the industry change as things move from, for example, paper tickets to now everything is on a mobile ticket, and has that had any kind of impact in tourism, you know, maybe COVID aside, but because it makes it easier. You don't have to go through a travel agent. You can just do it all yourself.
Yeah, no, I think since I've been at ATIA, so it's been about 8 years, or let's just say the past decade, and I'm sure you guys have seen this as technology has advanced and things just become more mobile and viral and connected online, and as more people become connected in communities, has certainly made getting the information to folks quicker and also able to adapt or be fluid with that information. So whether it's your marketing message or your airline ticket now, I mean, I do everything through my my airline apps. I was going to say Alaska Airlines. We have a good partnership with Alaska Airlines, but also all the airlines that come to Alaska. And I think that that has really added to the ease of getting an efficiency of getting information to travelers, so that they that it's a seamless experience for them. And then also on the other marketing side, it's certainly made this conversation with travelers, or this engagement with our audiences, more of a two-way street, right? So there's so much on social media and so much of, you know, local recommendations or local guides, or here was my experience, that there's just tons of media and messaging out there, which is both great for a destination and in getting information and hearing from someone that has experienced something that you're looking into. And certainly the imagery is great to see, you know, of Alaska throughout. And then it, you know, can also be a little double-edged sword in that you can't control what every individual is saying. But I think for the most part, it's been this explosion of opportunity for marketing, messaging, and connecting with people more efficiently and more fluidly.
Do you follow any of those just kind of user groups on Facebook, like there's the hiking in Alaska one or the mountain biking ones, just to see where people are going?
So I follow, so first of all, I have to admit, which I talked about earlier, I'm kind of I'm not as up on technology. I'm kind of a dork with technology. My son knows way more than I do, but I do follow. I'm a wannabe foodie. So as that relates to travel and tourism, I follow some of the food groups, and like there was a group about where the food trucks are, you know, happening in Anchorage in particular, because I live here. But I haven't gotten into follow some of the groups on the outdoor activities, and partly because there's so many great resources out there. So I've just sort of honed in on my wannabe foodie, I guess, thing.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, they got some good ones there. Allison, do you have something?
Pivoting a little bit back to kind of your career story, have you had a mentor or influential person kind of that has guided you along the way, or anybody kind of influential that's kind of led you on your journey?
You know, and I know people are asked this question a lot, and I would say that it hasn't just been one person. There have been a handful of people in the industry and in the nonprofit community that I have gone to and that I trust and that I can ask along the way about my career choices. And they're both women and men. And I think it comes down to when you have, first of all, I think everyone should have a mentor or many mentors. I mean, there's no rule to say you can't have a trusted circle of mentors, right? Because you might get some information, or just that person's personality might help you out with something where another person might support you in a different way. And so I've been really lucky to meet some amazing and strong women leaders and men leaders along the way that have supported me and have been trusted resources for me to go to during my career journey.
Yeah, I like the idea of having multiple mentors, because there can't be one size that would meet all the needs like that. On a similar vein, what is your approach to unifying your current team? So, you know, especially nowadays, but even before, you mentioned at the leadership summit that you already had flexible work environments in place. But how has this changed, and what are your plans for the future?
Yeah, I've always promoted, and you know, this may have come from working in places that maybe were a little more conservative. And so when I got into this position and realized, hey, I can set the culture, or I can help change the culture to something that not only benefits me, but that I know I would be more productive. So I feel like I really influence the culture here to have a flexible and progressive work environment, in that people can work remotely. Right now, we do connect through team meetings virtually quite frequently, twice a week, as a way to stay connected. I also really promote a work-life balance. So I think we have a pretty healthy leave policy for a nonprofit or a smaller nonprofit organization, because not only are we in the travel and tourism industry, but people should have time away from work to recoup and, you know, not only experience Alaska, but have that time off with family or friends. And then as you alluded to, because of the industry that we work in, we can be kind of flexible in when we work. And what became important to me was that as long as someone was a contributing part of the team and was achieving their objectives, then I didn't care when they worked. I didn't care if they happened to work late hours, or maybe they only wanted to work like really early until noon. As long as they were achieving what they were supposed to achieve for their position and for the association, that's what made me look good, made them look good, and that's what makes ATIA look good, and also be providing the service that we need to be providing to our members and to our industry. So I don't know if I answered your question, Mary Louise, but definitely support flexible work environments. And I guess it has become challenging in the pandemic, but I've made a real commitment to try to check in with the team virtually via Zoom, and we sometimes try to incorporate fun Zoom activities, you know, just to have the humor that you often miss when you're not in person, you know, over Zoom. So I think that's been really important in keeping our team connected.
Yeah. How big is your team, and how has the workload changed since the pandemic? Is it because everything's virtual now? Is it, and you know, there's obviously a lot of hurdles to get through now. Is it more workload, or is it less because there's less tourists? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we're a team of 8, and then we did add a couple of other team members because of a partnership we have with the Department of Health and Social Services in providing information to travelers around the travel mandates and advisories. So we're actually now a team of 10, which is a small or medium-sized maybe team for a nonprofit organization in Alaska. And I would say that the workload has shifted to, again, going back to what we talked about earlier with customers, it's a more maybe intense conversation with our business members and partners. So I actually feel like we're working more in having that conversation, because businesses need that support right now. And there's so much information out there, and it's complicated information, that having more of those conversations, where before maybe we connected with a member once a year. Now I feel like we are in various conversations with members every day to help support them get through the pandemic.
Yeah, makes sense. I'll kick it over to you, Allison.
So there were a few email questions that came in, so I'm going to pivot back to kind of industry questions. So Skagway, typically reliant on the cruise ship industry, is launching a campaign to draw small cruise lines, in-state travelers, and lower 48 travelers to visit. Are other communities doing something similar, and can they work together to make it a bigger initiative?
I have heard that other communities are doing things similar, and small ship cruise companies can operate. They're not foreign flagged, and so they can operate if they, you know, in partnering with local communities guidelines to provide experiences in Southeast Alaska primarily. You probably won't see small ship cruises in South Central or across the Gulf, just because they're not built to cross the Gulf. They're not that type of vessel in general. And I have heard that in Southeast, there is growing conversation around partnering around like a regional initiative. And then, as I mentioned earlier, at a statewide level, ATIA is encouraging resident travel throughout the state and also investing marketing in the independent and air traveler, again, throughout the state. So we're looking at all sorts of partnerships where whether it's fly and see, or how do we bring in the railroad, you know, things like that to increase and attract any type of visitation we can this year.
Do you have information on airline sales, like what it's looking like for the summer?
So I know that the capacity, or what I've heard so far, is the capacity at Anchorage and Fairbanks is at way better, the airline capacity at way better numbers than it was in last year. And so it's looking really positive for airline capacity into Anchorage and Fairbanks at least. And that does trickle down a little bit to then regional airlines and traffic intrastate. So we're hopeful that that capacity remains or sustains, and that we can do whatever we can to get people to fill those seats and visit our communities.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm gonna switch back over to some of your leadership questions. So what are some of your major successes and tough decisions that you've had to make throughout your career and especially in the travel industry?
So one of the things I tell my board of directors when I'm going through my review, one of my proudest achievements is the team that we've built here and the work environment. And even though it's a smaller team, I think that there are people here that want to work here. We're all supportive of each other. And I've also been able to promote women leaders and help support lifting other women leaders up. So I'm really proud of the team that we have at ATIA. And then with that, one of the hardest things I think to do as a leader is to let someone go or transition them from your organization, whether it's just not the right fit pre-pandemic or during the pandemic, when we also as a nonprofit organization were hit with some financial challenges. So we're in a much better place now, but there was a time where I had to transition 2 people from a small team, and those are just really heart-wrenching conversations, especially when it's not about performance, it's about sustaining the organization. So that's been one of the toughest things I think I've had to get through, and they, you know, had to get through also this year or this past year.
Mm-hmm. Dang. Now, Allison?
Not to keep pivoting back and forth, but we have one question that came in on the FAIR, the Marine Highway System. So the proposed 5-month summer schedule likely impacts tourism. Do you have any info on to what extent? And then is there a way that ATIA is helping to resolve the kind of skeletal ferry scheduling?
Yeah, I'm not as up on the detail of the ferry schedule right now. It will, you know, it will impact the visitor season because any kind of limiting factor obviously limits accessibility to Alaska or within Alaska. Also balancing out that the ferry provides services for communities, right? Whether it's resident travel or cargo and community services to many Southeast communities and South Central communities. I don't have recent numbers or any kind of economic data right now. I know the Alaska Marine Highway and the administration has been in long conversations about how to more sustainably operate the ferry system. And a couple of our board members have participated over the years in those conversations. And so we're really looking and support that there is some solution to bolster that. It's a valuable piece of infrastructure both for communities and for the visitor industry, and that there is a pathway for them to operate sustainably. But I admit I'm not as up on the specifics of the ferry schedule this summer.
Got it. So I'm going to read a question from the chat that just came in. I'll just read it verbatim. Have the European carriers like Iceland Air, etc., confirmed their plans for this year? Brian says, I had thought that Eurowings curtailed their Alaska flight schedule for 2021. However, he could be mistaken.
Well, I think I just heard yesterday that Eurowings and Condor will both have confirmed service to Anchorage and Fairbanks. So I haven't heard any differently. It might be a slightly limited service. And then also, this isn't international, but Sun Country has also coming, I think I'm getting that name right, to Fairbanks. So we are seeing, like I said, some positive steps towards airline capacity for this summer for Anchorage and Fairbanks, and then that does trickle down, I think, for potential independent travelers throughout our communities. I haven't seen recent news about Iceland Air though yet.
Got it. We're getting into the last 6 minutes or so of the hour, so I wanted to ask you kind of a two-part closer question. Mm-hmm. How do you take care of yourself in order to be a great leader? You mentioned your love of the outdoors and also like staying in hotels for a night. And then what advice would you give to your younger self?
All right, but first of all, I mean, other people like room service too, right? Yeah. Like that's kind of okay. That didn't come off as weird.
Yes,
okay.
No.
Yeah, it's sort of, pampering yourself is really what, and I think that I do try to not feel guilty about pampering myself and taking the time, whether it's taking a walk outside with my dog Kumu or going to a spa and, getting a pedicure or something like that. I think it's important for everyone, whether you consider yourself a leader or not, to really take time for yourself and whatever it is that you like to do. And so for me, I do like to pamper myself every once in a while if I'm able to do it. And so, yeah, I think that's important for everyone's like mental health and physical health. And advice to my younger self. Actually, my husband and I were just talking about this yesterday. And I think it would be to not worry so much about things or not stress so much, because there's things you just can't control. It either is going to be what it is or it isn't. And if you add stress to that, you're, wasting that energy on something else that could make you healthier. And I know that seems pretty simplistic, but I think that's what I try to also impart on my son is, don't worry so much about controlling every situation. Really, worry about the things that or try to inform the things that you can control, because that's putting positive energy into whatever situation.
I like that. Yeah, I've heard a quote, I don't remember it exactly, but essentially, saying don't stress about something that's in the future, because then you have to suffer twice.
Yeah. So. Yeah, exactly.
So, well, I so appreciate you taking the time again to come and chat with us, and really love the insight into what's going on around here, and then of course also into your leadership styles. I know a lot of people benefit from that type of conversation. So I'll reach out to you, outside of this conversation, but looking forward to chatting with you again in the future.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed these conversations, and hopefully there could maybe be an opportunity for more. I could ask you guys questions.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly appreciate our partnership with Alaska Communications, and thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Yes, that's a great idea. Talk soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.